Some comics give us young heroes with individualized personalities. Some comics give us heroes with mutated abilities. And some comics give us fantastical creatures that are larger than life. But there's only one comic that gave us all of these. On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from 1990. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Laramie Wells, and joining me today in the co-host chair is our mustachioed machismo. I'll come up with some nickname for you at some point. Please welcome Justin Baker.
Pleasure being here, Laramie. And I don't know about you, but are you hungry for pizza?
Oh, I'm always hungry for pizza. But it has to have the little table in the center.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I don't know why I associate that with the 90s, but I associate that with the 90s.
Hey, just make sure there's no anchovies, just like pineapple.
Oh, yeah. Look, pineapple so much doesn't belong on a pizza, and my wife is going to be upset that I talk about it. She loves pineapple on pizza.
I do love pineapple, but maybe not on pizza.
Look, it doesn't belong so much that when you look it up, it's always under the veggies option because it's the only fruit anyone wants to put on a pizza.
Mm-hmm. Well, would you rather have an anchovy pizza or a pineapple pizza?
Oh, now if I have to choose, I would definitely have a pineapple pizza. Ain't gonna lie. All right, but we're not talking about pizzas. Let's talk about this. So a couple of months ago, or a month or so ago, we did the 90s bracket of the best 90s movie. This, of course, was in the running, but it did not win.
Boo.
However, still want to talk about it, and so I've got Justin here to talk about the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, I want to ask you a question. I'm sure you knew this was based off of the animated TV show.
Yeah.
But did you know it was a comic book?
I did know it was a comic book. I grew up, of course, I was born in '86, so I grew up on the cartoon, and I knew there was a comic book, but being barely grade school age, not really being able to read, I didn't know too much about it. And actually, one of the first comic books I had, other than Sonic the Hedgehog, was actually the Cyber Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, you probably couldn't have read this even if you could read, because this was in a very adult comic too. I don't know if you were aware of that.
Oh yeah, after about college, I realized, I was like, ooh, this is very dark.
So for those of you not aware, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is based on a comic book that was created by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. The first issue premiered in May of 1984, published through their Mirage Studios. Now, Eastman and Laird named their company Mirage Studios because there was no actual studio.
It was
they did this all. Yeah, it was all out of Laird's living room to start off with.
Just like all the greats.
I did find this funny. So Mirage Studios, they released other things, and it wasn't all by Eastman and Laird. They eventually had other creators. But they released the comic book that was also turned into a cartoon around this time. So I want to see if you remember this. Wild West Cowboys of Moo Mesa.
It sounds familiar, but I'm going to say no.
Okay, see, I remember the cartoon for this comic. It was these cowboy cows, like they were cows. So same way the turtles, but these were cows. And yeah, I remember that. But for those of you who don't know, Eastman and Laird actually created this comic as a parody. It was kind of meant to be a parody. And I wanted so much to get into this, but the more I delved into the origin of this comic, I said this would take up too much time. So tune in next week, and Justin and I are going to talk about just the origin of this comic book.
Cowabunga, dude.
Yeah, so that will be a one-shot for next week to kind of talk about that. So we're just going to jump straight into talking about the movie. The movie was released March 30th of 1990, so we're almost a year from Batman '89 that kind of kicked off the resurgence of comic book movies. We're a year shy of Dick Tracy, which would make it more, cinematic and get the really, highbrow people interested.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're right here at the boom of comic book movies. And so now I've been racking my brain. I don't think I saw this in theaters.
I definitely know I didn't. I was 4 years old.
Yeah, so I was a little older. I don't think I saw it in theaters. If I did, it was later. So I think I've talked about this before. The town I grew up in had one of those like $1.50 movie theaters in which the movies were already like a couple months old by the time they would make it to us. And so if I did see it in theaters, it was a little bit later, but I honestly cannot recall. I know I was a huge Turtles fan at the time. I mean, I was the ripe age for it. I would have been 8 at the time the movie came out. So perfect age for the cartoon and for the toys and all that. But this movie was directed by Steve Barron. Are you familiar with Steve Barron?
I feel like I remember the name being for him being a music video director.
Yes, so he was a music video director. He directed such classics as Michael Jackson's Billie Jean music video. He directed Bryan Adams' The Summer of '69 music video. He directed Toto's Africa.
Oh, great song.
And probably one of the most iconic from the 80s. He is the director of a-ha's Take On Me video.
Those are all great music videos.
Which is a good one because that one ties in kind of a comic look to it with the drawn versions of the band and all. But he did other motion pictures, so I'm going to see if this surprises you. So he's the director of Coneheads.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
He directed Coneheads.
I would have not thought that. I mean, definitely, because Coneheads was SNL, wasn't it?
Yes.
And so, yeah, that just doesn't really seem his style, but maybe he wanted to challenge himself.
I mean, so let me give you another one that I found out he directed. He directed The Adventures of Pinocchio. You remember that one? That was the one where Jonathan Taylor Thomas played Pinocchio.
Oh, yeah. I feel like my wife would love probably rewatching that.
I will also give him a nod to the fact that I found out he was a cameraman for Superman the movie, 78.
Nice. There's your Superman connection.
There's my Superman connection.
And yet you couldn't move this on past the second round.
So what are... hey, look, I had 2 other people there with me. But we will talk about some of the... We'll probably get back into some of the things I remember I said in that bracket episode. But what's your connect? Because you asked me to do this movie. You wanted this to be one that you did. So what is your big connection? Like, is this one that you watch on a regular basis? Is it just pure nostalgia for you? What is it?
It's definitely more on the nostalgia. I know listening to y'all's 90 bracket, I know Nick and Tim were kind of talking about rewatchability. I'm not actually the type of person who rewatches movies. I kind of have a photogenic memory. I stretched this out over 2 viewings, Sunday and Monday. And I probably hadn't watched this movie in 3, 4, 5 years. And it felt like I had watched it a week ago. I knew the lines coming up. I was laughing at the jokes before the jokes were even, told. But yeah, growing up, I mean, I remember being on the playground, just like we talked about in the X-Men animated series episode way back when, on the playground at school, you were picking which X-Men you wanted to be. What Ninja Turtle were you? We had a tub under our bed, me and my brother, we have the original 4 Ninja Turtles. I think the only thing we pretty much didn't have was the Technodrome, and I blame my mother for that one because she didn't love us enough to get us the Technodrome or the blimp.
Okay, you're saying you had the original 4.
The original 4,
So,
yeah.
Did they have the squishy heads?
It has been a while. Not that I remember. I believe they were like one of the original.
So that means you did not have the original run.
Darn.
Because that's something I remember. I had Leonardo was the first one I owned. I had Leonardo, and he had a squishy head. And it was a head you could, even just easily like popped it off. But his head was squishy. And then when my parents said, hey, we're going to take you to Walmart. We're going to see if they have the other 3 turtles. We're going to get the other 3 turtles for you. I got the other 3 turtles, and they had hard heads. So I do know that if you have a squishy head turtle, that is an earlier turtle. So
I guess I got some turtle heads to squish when I go back to see my parents.
Yeah, I was actually just talking to a guy at work about the turtle toys, and we were talking about all the different ones we had, because that like you're saying, that was one I had so many different. I had the 4 turtles, I had Shredder, I had Splinter, I had some of these random characters. Like there was one, he was like a pizza pirate that I really want to go back and find out like where he came from in the animated series, because I really do not remember him. I just remember the toy. And I had the party wagon. I had there was a little vehicle that like launched pizzas.
Oh, nice.
Little pizza discs. And I had that. Yeah, I had I even had a couple of the variations of the turtles. I had one that was like a surfer version of, I think, Michelangelo.
Oh, yeah. There was one that was a skateboarder. A
Hawaiian shirt on or something. Yeah.
Yeah, we had those. We had the Cyber Turtles. I think we had 2 sets of the 4 turtles in just like they were just normal turtles, but there's one you could flip their head inside their body and they turned back into the baby turtles. Yep.
I remember those as well. I don't think I had one of those, but I do remember those. And of course, I had Casey Jones. Yeah. Oh. Okay.
I think we had Bebop and Rocksteady and the alligator, and don't think we had Krang.
Or Leatherhead.
Leatherhead.
Yeah, that was me and him talked about. He had Krang. I never had Krang. So, of course, he said he lost Krang, and so he just had the robot body. He was missing the Krang from the inside of it. All right, but this isn't a toy podcast. This is movie podcast, so we're gonna go ahead and move on. Let's start talking about the characters. To kick things off, she gets top billing. Let's talk April O'Neil, played by Judith Hoag, or as I will always, I know she's April O'Neil, but as most people will probably remember her as the mom from Halloween Town. So there she was. Then we got Casey Jones, played by Elias Koteas, who is, most people would know nowadays as Detective Olinsky on Chicago PD and all the Chicago series.
Oh, okay.
No, you didn't realize that was him?
I don't watch too much TV, but yeah, I definitely didn't know it. But now I want to go watch that series.
Yeah. Then we got the Shredder, played by James Sato. He's one of those actors that when you look at him, you'll go, "Oh yeah, that guy." Like I've seen him, I've seen you in things. What I know him from, and most people probably won't know what I'm talking about, but he was Dr. Chen on Eli Stone.
Oh.
But yeah, that was the Shredder. Then we've got the Turtles themselves, which I got to give credit to 2 people here, because there's a voice and there was a suit performer. So Leonardo, voiced by Brian Tochi, who many might know, especially fans of the 80s movies. He was Toshiro Takashi from the Revenge of the Nerd films. And then the suit performer was David Foreman. Most of the suit performers were just like stuntmen and puppeteers, so they didn't have an awful lot of recognizable background work. Then you got Michelangelo, voiced by Robbie Rist, who was Cousin Oliver from the Brady Bunch. I did not know that.
I don't know if I could even point out Cousin Oliver.
He's also the voice of me being me having young kids. He's also the voice of Stuffy on Doc McStuffins, the dragon.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the super performer is Michelin Sisti. I apologize if I mispronounced that. Then Donatello, of course, famously voiced by Corey Feldman.
Very surprised about that choice.
Yeah, don't think I need to list off things. Yeah, wouldn't you say that Corey Feldman should have been Michelangelo?
Oh, absolutely. Donatello was kind of the untapped potential in that movie.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that they chose Corey Feldman to do Donatello, but there you go. Then the super performer was Leif Tilden. And then we have Raphael, who was both voiced and performed by Josh Pius. And he's another one of those guys that if you see him, you're like, I'm pretty sure I've seen you in things. I recognized him once I did some digging. He is one of the detectives in Scream 3.
Oh.
Like one of the detectives that's investigating the Woodsboro murders and all.
And just a jack of all trades.
And then we've got the one that might surprise people if they did not already know this. And I'm curious if you already knew this. Splinter. Splinter is both voiced and performed by Kevin Clash. Do you know who Kevin Clash is?
I know I've heard the name, but
Sure you have.
What he's done is leaving my brain right now.
Well, Kevin Clash is a famous puppeteer working for Jim Henson.
Okay.
And in fact, his most famous character, the one he brought to life, Elmo.
Oh my gosh.
Can you believe the guy who is the voice of Splinter is also Elmo?
Oh. I wish Splinter would just beat up Elmo. It's my least favorite of the Sesame Street.
Well, Kevin Clash is no longer Elmo. He stepped down as Elmo, I think, back in like 2012. But he is the originator of the Elmo character. So, Splinter is Elmo. How crazy is that? All right, so as always, I ask the question, who do you want to see again, and who do you wish would be compacted in a trash truck?
I want to say compacted in a trash truck, and I had the name, and now I can't think of it because my brain is...
By the way, I'm just going to say, I didn't bother putting the information here about April's boss or Danny.
Oh, gosh, Danny.
Yes.
Dang it, Danny.
So, yeah.
I'm going to say for my, push the button on the trash compactor is Shredder's right-hand man. Is it Toshi? Tosh?
Oh,
Toshi?
okay. Yeah, I didn't write him down either. I didn't even... He completely slipped my mind. I think it was Tatsu? I think it was Tatsu.
Tatsu, yeah. The acting was so great. I just hated his character. When he hits, the new Foot Clan member, and he doesn't really do anything, and then he gets beat up, so easily by Casey Jones.
Yeah,
I was just like, he didn't really bring anything to the table. Like, he could have almost been out of the movie, and it would have been the same.
Yeah, there's a lot about the fact that Shredder and then this guy Tatsu, who appears to be all tough and all that. Mm-hmm. The fact that they're just bossing around a bunch of teenage kids.
Oh, yeah. They don't want to get their hands dirty until, like, the last 10 minutes of the movie.
But for the fact that they're supposed to be all big and intimidating, the fact that all the Foot Clan is a bunch of teenage boys.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's it. It's a bunch of... and then their biggest nemesis are these hero turtles who are 15 years old.
Well, Larry, you got to remember, me and you are teachers, so teenage boys don't scare us like they scare other people.
Yeah, but this is these don't. I mean, they're supposed. So, and we're kind of getting into this a little bit. The Foot Clan are supposed to be this, scary gang there's just this crime wave happening in New York. But what are they doing? They're stealing TVs off of balconies.
Mm-hmm.
They're
old ladies.
Yeah.
Stealing stuff from trucks.
Yeah, they're not doing anything that dangerous, to be honest.
No. To me, it felt more like, they've now come from Japan to New York. This is Shredder's fundraising opportunity. He's got to get the down payment, on his hideout and all those video games he's buying them. So, let's steal TVs and, wallets and then sell it.
Yeah. I will say I was looking it up while we were talking. So Tatsu, maybe one of the reasons why it's so odd is because that the actor playing Tatsu was not the one voicing Tatsu.
Oh, yeah, that would make sense.
So that could explain it a little bit there. So for me, I threw out Danny. For me, it's Danny. Like I do not like the character Danny. So he would be the one that ends up in the trash compactor for me.
Yeah, he was tough to understand. I just kind of just felt he was the MacGuffin for them to have an inside way.
He absolutely was.
To the Foot Clan, and I just kind of had to put on my ELA hat and just be like, you know what, this is the key to get into the Foot Clan for the Turtles. Just let it happen.
Yeah. But I mean, there's no development to his character. Like, we don't know why his father thinks that he's such a troublemaker. Like, we don't see any of that being built.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just gets really random at the end.
He's hiding in the sewer.
Well, no, but I'm talking about at the very end when he reunites with his father and they hug. And his father says, oh, Danny, I'm, so glad you're safe. And he goes, the name's Dan. Okay.
Just that.
Great. Wonderful.
Just those weird 80s kids, I guess.
Well, let's even talk about the weird relationship between April and her boss. What kind of relationship do they have that he just stops by her apartment with his son?
A very good one, apparently.
Now, I know this is pretty much intended to be a kid's movie, but did you get the impression that maybe they were having an affair?
I felt, to me, maybe not an affair, maybe they had dated, and maybe it ended cordially, or they were just very good friends. But also, I mean, I've heard stories from my parents, who worked, during the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they tell me, how relaxed rules were. So to me, that's kind of the sunglasses I put on, was, this is basically, the movie came out in 1990, but, it's 80s, late 80s culture. And, everything, from, I was only born in 86, but from what I'd kind of heard from my parents and my older brother was just kind of everything went in the 80s. It was just a very different time back then.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I honestly just look at it as, hey, we don't have the ability to build a newsroom set, so we're just going to have all of this happen at April's apartment. Yeah. So
especially when you're doing, I think they filmed everything on location too.
Well, it was filmed in North Carolina and then only a few exteriors in New York in order to actually establish the New York part. So I do want to go back and talk about the performers that played the Turtles. Mm-hmm. So all four of the performers, the guys that were in the suits, all four of them actually appear in the movie.
Yeah, they all have a cameo, don't they?
Yep. Leonardo David Foreman is one of the gang members. Michelangelo, Michelin's Sisti, he's the pizza delivery man.
I wouldn't.
Donatello, go ahead.
I was going to say, he didn't look like a very athletic guy that could, do karate and ninjutsu in a giant rubber suit.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there were probably also stunt performers for some of it as well. But then you've got Donatello Leaf Tilden. He was a messenger for the Foot Clan. And then Raphael, who again was voiced and performed by Josh Pius, he was a taxi passenger.
Okay.
So
yeah, when Raphael jumps over, rolls over the taxi.
Yep. So I also wrote this down. So Leif Tilden, who was Donatello, speaking of 90s, for those of you who remember the show Dinosaurs,
yeah,
he was also the performer for Robbie Sinclair and Richfield on Dinosaurs.
Okay.
All right. So are there how do I want to ask this? Did you think that these suits worked? That's always the big talk. Is these rubber mechanical suits? Did they work for you?
They did. I actually like these better than Secret of the Ooze suits and
yes, they
definitely Turtles in Time suits.
Turtles in Time are horrible.
They were very muted. They looked like they had been living in the sewer. They weren't bright and vibrant colored. I also loved how like the wristbands, the armbands were just like a brown colors. Like the only way you could tell what turtle was which was their headband and their weapons.
Yeah.
And it just looked realistic. I remember the scene. Raphael had gone out at night and he, came back after Casey Jones beating him up. And as, Splinter's putting his hand on his head, like you could see the sweat on the top.
Yeah.
And it just, to me, it looked, it goes with the very realistic vibe that the movie had set.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree that the suits are great. The suits are amazing. I did. And for those of you who don't know, they were a Jim Henson creation. In fact, this was one of, if not the last thing Jim Henson was involved with before. And so I did hear, though, that Jim Henson originally turned it down.
Oh, that's interesting.
And the reason being is because he felt it was too violent. And, he was telling the filmmakers, I'm a kid-friendly creator. I do this stuff. I'm associated with all these family-friendly things, so I don't know if I want to have my name associated with something so violent. And he pretty much had to be proven that it wasn't as violent as he thought it was going to be. And so then he agreed to do it, and I'm so glad he did.
Oh,
because it looks the suits look great.
Oh,
I will say I do, and I think I said this in the 90s bracket, I do think the Secret of the Ooze suits are maybe just a little bit better. And I say that because I do think they cleaned up the animatronics a little bit more in their faces. But I also think these suits in the first movie weren't really made to be seen in daylight.
True.
And so the scenes where they're at like the farmhouse, some of them, the suits just look a little too fake, in my opinion. They're better in the dark, whereas in Secret of the Ooze, I think they adjusted the suits to look a little bit better when it was, brighter. So that's my thought.
I get that.
That's what I say.
Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and listen to an 80s Flick Flashback podcast once in a while, you could miss it. Do you love movies of a certain age? Do you miss the days of VHS tapes, VCRs, and the video rental stores? Does the thought of another 80s movie being remade seem inconceivable? My name is Tim Williams. I'm the creator and host of the 80s Flick Flashback podcast. On each episode, I'm joined by guest co-hosts to discuss one of the many movies released in the 1980s. We share our first-time watch memories, our favorite scenes, and even learn some behind-the-scenes stories about the cast and crew along the way. New episodes are released every other Friday on your favorite podcasting platform. So make like a tree, get out of here, and go listen to an excellent episode of the 80s Flick Flashback podcast. The ad is over. Go home. Go.
All right, let's get into the moving panels. So again, there is a comic, and I am going to be perfectly honest. There's some great comic connections here. But this movie isn't, of course, just based on a comic book. This movie is definitely also a live action version of the animated series, which the animated series is very different from the comic in terms of its tone.
Absolutely.
So again, the comic is very dark and gritty, and it was in black and white. And whereas the animated cartoon, of course, for kids, lively. The colored bandanas that we mentioned earlier, the colored bandanas was from the cartoon, not in the comic book. Of course, the comic book was black and white. The only way that you could tell the turtles apart were by their weapons. But even when they would use like color for the cover, the turtles wore all red bandanas. All of them. All four wore red bandanas.
I remember
that was from
the first NES game for Ninja Turtles, and the cover is all of them wearing red. The cover had them
in red. Yep, I remember that too. But yeah, it was actually the people behind like the marketing that talked Eastman and Laird into agreeing to Laird, not Lard, Eastman and Laird into doing the colors, just because, and they understood, it would help with identification, give them kind of a little bit more of a personality. Which, speaking of, the whole Michelangelo personality about he's the party dude, that is entirely from the comic, or excuse me, from the cartoon, not the comic.
Okay.
So, because in the comic he's just as stern and
serious,
as the rest of them. And then we talked about earlier their love for pizza. That's a cartoon thing, not a comic book thing. But let's talk about what is connected, because I was amazed. So I'll go ahead and say I had never read the comics until you told me you were interested, and so I got a collection of the comics and I started reading the comics. And as soon as I finished issue number 1, I was like, this is one of the truest movie comic adaptations I have ever seen.
Oh wow!
So in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 1, which, like I said earlier, came out in May of 1984, we pretty much get this movie. So it starts off with the Turtles fighting off some gang members. We even end up discovering it was their very first battle. Like the very first time they had ever gone out. Then we get Shredder telling them the origin story, which we'll talk more about next week in the one-shot. But I do want to point out that their origin story is almost exact. Like Splinter talking about finding them in the ooze and scooping them up into a coffee can, and then naming them. Like all of it is exact. Like almost even the wording is exactly the way Splinter says it in the movie.
I was about to say, I didn't remember Shredder telling the story.
Nah. Well, I'm looking ahead in my notes. So we even get the background story of Splinter's master and the love triangle that caused the feud between his master and Shredder. Although in the comic book, Shredder is not the guy from the story. Shredder is the younger brother of the guy from the story. So in the comic book, he's seeking revenge for his brother's death.
Okay, gotcha.
On the house of Hamada that Splinter is associated with.
Okay.
But it even ends when they face Shredder. At the end of the very first comic book, they face Shredder on a rooftop, and they defeat Shredder. It's the 4 of them teaming up to fight him all at once, and they throw him off the top. It's not Splinter. It's not Splinter.
Which was a little weird in the movie. I don't know if you noticed this, but I always love how it's the one-on-one, we have 50-foot soldiers, but let's line up and, attack Michelangelo one at a time. But when they're fighting Shredder on the roof, they take turns attacking him. And then,
which is, like I said, that's from the comic.
And then all of a sudden, he gets Leonardo down and he says, oh, fools, if you would have, all 3 of you could have attacked me at once. But at no point did they ever all, not even two of them attacked them at the same time. They all just took turns.
Well, but then at the end they do all. They start off kind of with all four of them. That's the way the comic lays it out. Is they each attack one by one, and it's because they're doing it. They've been taught honor, by Splinter, making it a fair fight. So
True.
they attack individually. But in the comic, the same thing happens, and then they decide to actually just all four go at it with Shredder, and that's what causes the defeat of Shredder. I will say, though, in the movie, the Foot do attack in the mob mentality. There's even that scene where Raphael, right before Raphael gets beat up to the point where he gets, thrown off, where he even says, "How do y'all expect to beat me?" And then all of a sudden, more of them come up.
Good answer.
Good answer. Good answer. Then move on to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 2, the second issue. That's where we're introduced to April. That's the first issue with April O'Neil. She is not a reporter in the comic books.
Really?
Yep. The reporter thing was created for the cartoon.
Oh.
In the comic book, she is a computer programmer and a lab assistant to Baxter Stockman. Which anyone who's a fan of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles recognizes the name Baxter Stockman.
Mm-hmm. Which might have been even more entertaining.
Yeah. Well, in fact, in the comics, she is actually the one who helps Baxter Stockman program the Mausers.
Oh, gosh.
Of course, then when she finds out what his intention is with them, that's why she
has change of heart.
She has a change of heart. But that was issue number 3, or 2, issue number 2. So, again, we've got April. Then we move on into issue number 3 and showing the connection here. In issue number 3 of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Splinter is abducted.
Oh, gosh.
But he's not abducted by the Foot. He is abducted. I think it ends up being aliens.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I think it ends up being aliens that he's abducted.
I do know, the one thing I do know about the comics is it's very crazy. A lot of, different dimensions and aliens, and I think the ooze is supposed to be from an alien race even.
Well, I think they did that in the cartoon too, where you end up finding out the ooze is part of like Krang's universe or something, or was that in the movie, the Michael Bay movie? But anyway, that's
definitely not Secret of Ooze.
No, that's another conversation. But in issue number 3, when Splinter is abducted, they even have where Raphael takes it the hardest, like he, loses his mind and all that. So you got all that connection. Then I want to jump to, which was actually the 4th issue that was published, but it wasn't issue number 4. They did a one-shot that was just centered on Raphael. It was called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Micro Series Raphael, number 1. And this was published in April of 1985. And this was the introduction of Casey Jones.
Okay.
In this issue. And their introduction is almost identical to what we see in this movie.
Was there a Jose Canseco bat?
I don't think there was the joke about Jose Canseco bat. But in the comic, Casey Jones wants to kill the muggers.
Oh.
And Raphael prevents him from killing the muggers. Not just beating them, but killing them.
Yeah, but that probably wouldn't have flown in the movie.
Shows you again how much it was, how dark the comics were. Then there's a little bit of a gap until I found another connection, but it didn't take long. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 10 and number 11, because it's kind of an arcing story. So in number 10, one of the turtles, just like in the movie, but I got a little surprise here. One of the turtles is involved in a rooftop beating by the Foot Clan and is then thrown through a skylight into April's apartment right in front of his brothers
Oh, gosh.
But in the comic book, it's Leonardo, not Raphael. Yeah, it's Leonardo. And then we get, in this comic, we get the same battle. The fight starts, but instead of the floor collapsing, they kind of move into the junk shop.
Okay.
So the second time around junk shop that April owns from her uncle, father, whichever one it was, that's in the comic. It ends the same way, with the turtles having to retreat, and the shop and apartment is all burning up as they drive away. So it's just like in the movie. And just like in the movie, they head towards a farmhouse.
Go farming.
And this farmhouse I don't think they establish where it is in the movie, but in the comic book, the farmhouse is in Northampton, Massachusetts.
Okay.
So they drive all the way to Massachusetts from New York. And then we get into issue number 11, which, just like the comic, it is amazing how much they use these comics. In issue number 11, they're at the farmhouse, and almost the entire issue is narrated by April.
Oh, wow. That is just like the movie.
Yeah. There's even the scene where Donatello and Casey are working on the truck and they're insulting each other.
Atomic breath.
Yeah. But in the comic book, it ends with the truck actually cranking up and it's in gear, and Donatello goes flying off and ends up crashing it into a ditch. Which I think could have been fun for the scene. But yeah, can you imagine? And of course, then they come back and they have the fight with Shredder, which, like I said, you go all the way back to issue number 1. It amazed me how much, considering that, I really thought this was a live action version of the cartoon, but to realize how much the writers and director and everyone involved actually pulled from these comics.
I'm sure it was a weird feeling too. We're a little bit used to read the comics, then see the movie and kind of compare, how much is similar. But for you got to see, you've known the movie for most of your life.
I've known the movie for 30 years.
And now you're reading the comic and you're seeing the connections.
Yeah, but it's still, this is without a doubt, and I know we're about to get into our final decision, but this is without a doubt one of the most true adaptations I have ever seen. To connect it so dead on with the source material. It really gave me a different kind of perspective on this movie, just a little bit. I will say, and this is what I alluded to earlier, and I talked about in the 90s bracket, I will say the farmhouse stuff, it kind of slows the movie down to me.
A little bit.
And so, it's not my favorite part. And it's kind of what I think didn't allow it to knock out so quickly in our bracket. But it is what it is. But have you read any of the comics? I
have not. I do have Last Ronin on my
Last Ronin
list.
is
which is completely different.
Yes, I've read The Last Ronin. That is one of the greatest comic books I have ever read.
Yeah. My goal this summer.
That's completely different.
My goal this summer was to read it, and then I ended up getting dragged into coaching football. So yeah, there went that.
Yeah, I do think when I found a collection of the original comics, I want to say they were part of Comixology. If you have that, if you get that subscription on as part of like your Kindle, your Amazon Prime, I think if you pay for Cosmicology, I want to say that the Turtles collection of comics is free.
Okay.
Quote unquote free. Again, you're paying a monthly subscription, but it's part of your subscription. All right, but let's go ahead and get into it. Final decision, bag it, stack it, or trade it. I'll let you go ahead, Justin, and let us know how you feel about the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I am going to have to go with bag it on this. Ninja Turtles, one, it is a little bit of nostalgia, but I remember the VHS tape we had, and it was the one with the, Pizza Hut baseball player kid picking dandelions out. And I wore that tape out. My parents actually had to get a second tape because I watched it so much.
Correct me if I'm wrong. So the Turtles had a huge tie-in with Pizza Hut.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't it a Domino's delivery guy?
It is Domino's, yeah. Which is weird because I think I read something where Pizza Hut, I guess, outbid Domino's to be the special pizza sponsor and have those coupons. And I do remember a story of somebody who bought the VHS. It had the coupon in there. It had no expiration date, and they used it. And I want to say it was in around 2010, and the Pizza Hut actually honored the coupon. But for me, for the Baggett, it is the nostalgia. I have, like I said, a tub of the toys. The other movies just do not compare, in my opinion. This was kind of the first movie I ever watched with any adult themes. I'm pretty sure this is the first movie I heard my first curse words from Raphael in it. And to me, the suits are just amazing. The jokes still make me laugh today. To me, most of the movie held up. This would be a movie that, if and when I have kids, I would have them watch it. Maybe not the first movie that they watch out of the Turtles. Maybe Turtles in Time or Mayhem or one of the animated ones, and then be like, "Hey, like this is the first one. Let's watch this."
Yeah. Now that you're a little older, so just because you got my brain thinking, Pizza Hut.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember? And I want to say this was after maybe the second movie, though. Do you remember when they turned the Turtles into a band?
Oh, we had the cassette tape.
And you could get the soundtrack from Pizza Hut. Like it was a Pizza Hut sponsored whole everything. Like everything about the Turtles live band performance.
I even
coming out of their shells. I just remembered the freaking song. Coming out of our shells.
Do you want to? I even remember Splinter had a song called Stepping Stones. It was Stepping Stones. Wow. Yeah, we had that on cassette tape.
And then
right
you could even
buy.
You could buy a VHS of like the performance, like watching the show.
Oh
my God! That flooded back into my head.
And speaking of soundtracks, Nick will appreciate this. The soundtrack to the movie is very good. I enjoyed. It doesn't have Vanilla Ice, so that's a plus.
No, that's the second one. Yeah.
But the soundtrack had me bouncing around on the sofa. I even watched it all the way to the credits, and Brittany was just like, "Why are you still watching this movie?" Yeah. And I told her, I just don't want it to end.
Yeah, this one's got the Turtle Powers song, the TURTLE Powers.
Which actually there's a mistake in that song. They actually say Raphael's the leader, not Leonardo.
Yes, no, I actually, I remember that. Oh man, part of the lyrics are starting to pop into my head now too. You talked about though being, and that was Partners in Crime. I actually remember who performed that song too. It's Partners in Crime. But anyway, you talked about laughing at the jokes. Did you really, like, even when you watched it preparing for this, did you laugh out loud at things like Bossa Nova? Chevy Nova?
Chevy Nova did have me laughing.
Okay. See, it did.
Bossa Nova was actually going to be my intro instead of talking about pizza. But
yeah, so I've got to say I debated whether I wanted to say bag it or stack it. I'm going to go bag it. And the reason I'm going to go bag it is because, one, as I've talked about in the past, the cultural impact this movie had. not only was it right at the height of turtle popularity, and so it came out, it wasn't like some things where they took just a little too long to make the movie, and so it's past its prime.
Mm-hmm.
This was right in the middle. This was right at, what was it, this would have been right at the end of season 4,
I believe so,
of the cartoon, and the cartoon would go on for 10 seasons. Like, this was right smack in the middle of all of it. Then the character work with the suits, with the Jim Henson Creature Shop. Yeah, it's a lot of nostalgia. I do think the rewatchability factor is not huge on this. It's not one that I just want to put in, frequently.
Mm-hmm.
The farmhouse stuff just kind of slows it down for me. Even the part of Splinter showing up as like a Force ghost.
Wish my fire pit would do that.
Yeah, a little bit much for me. I like the stuff with Casey Jones and April. I honestly wish we had gotten more Casey Jones, to be honest. So, yeah, it's a bag it for me. I could probably talk about it a little bit more in terms of what I feel, but I think we've said enough.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to say, I do remember this as a independent movie. It was the highest grossing independent movie until Blair Witch Project.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah. And of course, it was released by New Line Cinema, the house that Freddie built. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Again, tune in again next week as Justin and I will do a one-shot over just more about the origin, the creation of the comic book, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic, and just what was going on at that point in the 80s that would create something like this. So we'll talk about more of that, but thank you, Justin, for joining me. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Rate and review the show, and as always, just support us in every way you can. Support all of our podcasting friends and family. But for today, for Moving Panels, I'm Laramie Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
Cowabunga.